All right, let's dive into the science of fat loss. We've got a ton of research and insights from Dr. Mike Israetel. This is like your cheat sheet to getting and staying lean, and I think you'll find some surprises along the way.
Yeah, it's funny. When we talk about fat loss from an evolutionary perspective, humans are actually amazing at gaining fat.
Interesting. Why is that? You'd think evolution would have favored being lean, right?
Well, see, for most of human history, food was hard to come by. Our ancestors didn't exactly have grocery stores or refrigerators. So storing energy as fat, that was like a key survival mechanism.
Ah, I see. So our bodies are kind of programmed for a famine that, at least for most of us, never actually comes.
Yeah, exactly. And now, in the modern world where we've got hyper-palatable food, like everywhere, it's like the ancient programming is kind of backfiring on us.
So how do we work with that, or like around it?
Yeah.
To actually lose fat. I know the whole calories in, calories out thing is a big topic, but I've also heard people say calories don't matter. What's the real story?
Well, the calorie equation is definitely like the foundation, but it's not always about, meticulously counting every single calorie. Different diets can actually work because they indirectly create that calorie deficit. Like, think about the keto diet, for example. A lot of people naturally eat less because they're cutting carbs and they end up feeling less hungry.
So they're kind of like hacking the system without realizing it.
Exactly. Same goes for diets that emphasize whole, unprocessed foods. They tend to be more filling and less calorie dense. So, the key takeaway is that there aren't any magical foods that melt fat away. What matters is the overall energy balance.
That makes a lot of sense. I've definitely fallen for some of those magic food promises before. So if someone's seeing progress without tracking calories super strictly, do they really need to start?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, if what you're doing is working, keep it up. But if you're hitting a plateau or just feeling stuck, tracking calories even for a little while can be a really powerful tool. It can help you pinpoint those hidden calorie bombs that might be stalling your progress. Plus, there are different levels of tracking. You can be mindful of portion sizes or really dive deep into counting macros depending on your personality and goals.
Okay, makes sense. How about weighing yourself? Is that like a daily thing or?
If you're just maintaining your weight, weighing in once a week or even monthly is fine. But if you're actively trying to lose fat, I'd recommend 2 to 3 times a week.
Well, this reminds me of something that actually surprised me. Daily weigh-ins can be misleading, right? Because of normal water weight fluctuations.
Yeah, for sure. You might see the scale go up after a salty meal or a hard workout and think you've gained fat when it's actually just water retention. Weighing in less often gives you a clearer picture of your real progress.
Okay, so less frequent weigh-ins. Got it.
Yeah.
Switching gears a bit, what about this thing called settling point theory? Does that mean our weight is basically predetermined?
Well, settling point theory suggests that your body kind of has this weight range it prefers. It's influenced by your genetics, your environment, and your lifestyle.
So not like a fixed number, but more of a comfortable zone.
Right. And that zone can definitely shift based on the choices you make. But think about our food environment today. I mean, everywhere we look, there are these calorie-dense, super palatable foods, They're practically designed to make us want to eat more.
It's true. They're everywhere, and honestly, they're delicious.
Exactly. It's like this combination of our biology and the easy access to all this tasty, calorie-rich food, and it all contributes to that rise in obesity that we see. So one thing you can do, take away from this is be mindful of your own personal food environment.
So like if your kitchen is full of chips and cookies, you're basically setting yourself up for a harder time.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes beyond your kitchen, too. Think about places like social gatherings, snacks at the office, even, the restaurants you usually go to. Being aware of those environmental triggers can help you make more conscious choices.
That's a great point. Now, this next topic might be a little controversial. What about medication for fat loss?
Well, first of all, it's important to acknowledge that using medication for weight loss is a personal decision. And there can be ethical considerations, right? But you can't deny that medications like semaglutide have shown some remarkable results. I mean, they've helped people lose significant weight, sometimes when nothing else has worked.
And Dr. Israetel has a really interesting perspective on this, too. He talks about how medication can free up willpower and mental energy so you can focus on other parts of your life. That can be pretty powerful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's about realizing that tools and advancements, and that includes medication, are a part of human progress. They're not a quick fix or a replacement for healthy habits, but they can be valuable for some people, especially, with proper medical supervision.
So it's not about demonizing medication. It's about using it responsibly as part of a bigger approach to health, right? Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of food a bit. Where do macros fit into all of this, protein, carbs, and fat?
Well, protein is super important, especially if you're doing resistance training. It helps you hang on to muscle mass while you're in a calorie deficit, which is key for a healthy metabolism and body composition.
Okay, so how much protein are we talking about generally?
Aim for around 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight. But of course, you can adjust this based on your individual needs and how active you are.
Got it. Now, what about carbs and fat? Are they as critical when it comes to fat loss?
They're definitely important for overall health. But for straightforward weight loss, they're less crucial than hitting your protein target and staying within your overall calorie goals. As long as you've got those nailed down, you've got some flexibility with carbs and fat. Actually, this is where Dr. Israetel's It Just Doesn't Matter app can be really helpful.
I've heard about that. It basically takes the guesswork out of figuring out your carb and fat intake, right?
Yeah, exactly. It helps you find a balance that works for you without having to get lost in all these complicated calculations. So you can adjust your carbs and fat and see how they affect your hunger, energy, and workouts, and just figure out what feels best for you.
Speaking of fat, there's so much talk about seed oils being bad for you. What's the real deal with that?
Honestly, the whole seed oil debate is often blown out of proportion. Most plant-based oils like olive oil, canola oil, even those that come from seeds, are totally fine in a balanced diet. They give you those essential fatty acids and can be a good source of healthy fats.
So no need to be scared of them?
Not at all. The real thing to be mindful of is those highly processed fats, like trans fats. Those are the ones you find in a lot of processed and fried foods.
Okay, so focus on whole food sources, keep an eye on overall fat intake, and don't stress too much about the seed oil hype. Got it. Now, I've always wondered about meal timing and frequency. Does it actually matter when and how often you eat for fat loss?
That's a common question. And to bust a myth right now, eating frequently does not magically boost your metabolism. It just doesn't work that way. What matters for weight loss is, again, your total calorie balance. There's even been research that compared alternate day fasting to more frequent eating, and the results were super similar when they matched the calories.
So you're saying you don't have to be constantly snacking to keep your metabolism fired up?
Exactly. Find what works best for you and your lifestyle. However, if your priority is building and keeping muscle, especially if you're lifting weights consistently, then spreading out your meals and making sure you're getting enough protein with each meal becomes more important.
So if you're working out hard, got to fuel those muscles more consistently. Makes sense. Let's talk about food choices now. Are there really bad foods we should absolutely avoid when trying to lose fat?
Well, instead of thinking about foods as good or bad, think more about how palatable they are and how satisfying they are. Remember, we talked about how those super delicious, calorie-dense foods can make it tougher to resist overeating.
Right. Our brains are wired to seek out those tasty, high-calorie treats.
Yeah.
What exactly is the food palatability reward hypothesis? I've heard that term before.
It basically explains how our brains are wired to get pleasure from foods that are super palatable, which makes sense evolutionarily, back when food was scarce.
Yeah.
But now, with all these foods so easily available, that drive can make fat loss more challenging.
So our taste buds are kind of working against our weight loss goals.
Yeah, kind of. It's not about totally avoiding those delicious foods. It's about finding ways to manage hunger and those cravings without feeling like you're constantly depriving yourself. Like, for example, instead of loading up your chicken breast with a creamy sauce, try using a dry rub, with herbs and spices.
That's a great tip. I love using herbs and spices to add flavor without all the extra calories. What are some other ways to make those adjustments?
Another thing you can do is gradually increase the amount of fruits and vegetables you eat. They're low in calories, high in fiber, and help you feel full and satisfied. Plus, there are so many different kinds and ways to prepare them. You're bound to find something you like.
I love that. It's about making healthy choices enjoyable and not a punishment.
Exactly. It's about finding a way of eating that supports your goals and helps you feel good mentally and physically.
Now, let's talk about the sweet tooth. Sugar cravings can be tough for a lot of people. What's your take on artificial sweeteners for managing those cravings?
Well, artificial sweeteners can be a helpful tool, They let you satisfy that sweet tooth without adding a bunch of calories. There's even research that shows diet sodas actually worked better than plain water for weight loss.
Wow, really? That's surprising. I've heard so much negative stuff about diet soda, but it sounds like it might not be as bad as we think.
Like anything else, moderation is key. But don't be afraid to try things like diet soda or other artificially sweetened drinks if they help you manage cravings and stick to your calorie goals.
So it's not about demonizing certain foods or drinks. It's about finding what works for you and using it mindfully. Makes sense. What are some other strategies for people who just can't resist a little something sweet?
Fresh fruit is always a great option. It's naturally sweet and has fiber to keep you full. There are also some lower-calorie ice cream alternatives like Halo Top and Enlighten that can hit the spot. And for something a bit different, you could try protein-rich alternatives like the pastries from Legendary Foods.
Those sound interesting. I'll have to check those out. Now, switching gears to exercise. What about cardio? What role does that play in all of this?
Think of cardio as a tool to burn calories, not like this magical fat-melting activity. Dr. Israetel actually prefers step counting over traditional cardio.
I like that approach. It's easier to fit into your day and not as intimidating. How many steps should we aim for?
Aiming for 10,000 steps or more each day is a good goal. You can even just work it into your normal routine. Take the stairs instead of the elevator, walk during your lunch break, things like that. It's about moving more without feeling like you have to do these intense workouts.
Love it. Simple and effective. Now, we can't forget about resistance training. How important is that for losing fat?
Resistance training is super important for holding on to that muscle mass when you're in a calorie deficit. It helps you maintain a healthy metabolism and have a better body composition. You don't just want to lose weight, you want to lose the right kind of weight.
That makes a lot of sense. So if someone wants those six-pack abs, what's the secret?
Well, the truth is, everyone already has abs. They're just hidden under a layer of fat for most people.
So all those targeted ab exercises won't magically make the fat disappear?
Nope, unfortunately not. You can't spot reduce fat from specific areas.
But having stronger abs will make them look more defined once you are lean enough, right?
Right, exactly. Resistance training, and that includes those ab exercises, helps you build more muscle definition. That way, when you do shed the fat, those abs will really pop.
Okay, let's get real about supplements. Do those fat burners actually work?
Most fat burners rely on stimulants, like caffeine, which can give you a temporary energy boost and maybe suppress your appetite, but they're not going to lead to long-term fat loss.
So no magic pill for fat loss?
Not really, no. They might give you a little edge, but they're not a substitute for a solid diet and exercise plan.
And what about the potential downsides of using those stimulants?
Well, you can build up a tolerance, so you need more and more to get the same effect. They can also lead to rebound hunger and mess with your sleep, which can actually sabotage your progress.
So it's all about finding those healthy habits that you can sustain and ditching the quick fixes, right?
Right.
Now, a lot of people struggle with diets failing. Why do you think that happens so often?
Well, think about it. Most diets are kind of fighting against how we're naturally wired. We're programmed to crave and enjoy calorie-dense foods. Restricting yourself too much can lead to what we call diet fatigue, and you end up going back to your old ways.
It's like a constant battle between willpower and biology.
Exactly. Diet fatigue is real, and it's one of the biggest obstacles to long-term success.
So how do we win that battle? What are some strategies for navigating those challenges and setting ourselves up for success?
Managing your food environment is huge. Get rid of unhealthy temptations at home, be mindful of the restaurants you choose, and have a plan for those social events.
So set yourself up for success by making the healthy choices the easy choices.
Exactly. Also, make sure your goals are realistic. If you try to lose weight too quickly, you're more likely to burn out and have a harder time sticking with it in the long run.
Slow and steady wins the race, right?
Right. Focus on those gradual changes that you can maintain over time. Remember, this is a journey, not a sprint.
All right, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's talk about transitions and breaks. What happens when you reach your goal weight? Does the diet just end?
That's a really important question. The diet shouldn't just stop cold turkey when you hit your goal. You need a plan to transition back to maintaining your weight without regaining all the weight you lost.
So it's not about deprivation forever?
Not at all. It's about finding a way of eating that you can stick with for the long haul. And that's where diet breaks come in.
I've heard they could be helpful, but what exactly do they involve?
Think of it like a planned vacation from your calorie deficit. Usually you'd maintain your current weight for a week or two while you're in that longer dieting phase.
So taking a break can actually boost your progress. That seems counterintuitive.
It might seem that way, but it's about the bigger picture. Diet breaks can help with a lot of things, like managing those feelings of deprivation, rebalancing your hormones, and even kind of resetting your metabolism.
I can see how giving yourself that permission to take a break can make it easier to stick with your diet over time. It really is like taking a step back to take 2 steps forward.
Exactly. Dieting doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's about finding an approach that works for you and includes strategies to help you succeed long term.
This is all making so much more sense now. It really shows how understanding the science can totally change your view on fat loss.
Absolutely. When you have the knowledge, you can make informed choices about your health.
Speaking of knowledge, before we move on to the next part, I want to circle back to the difference between weight loss and fat loss. They seem like the same thing, but you mentioned there's a key distinction.
You got it. People use them interchangeably, but it's important to remember that weight loss refers to any decrease in your total body weight. That could include muscle, water, and fat loss. Fat loss is specifically about reducing the amount of fat your body is storing.
So, in theory, you could lose weight without actually losing fat.
Exactly. And, that happens more often than people realize. That's why focusing on fat loss specifically is so important. We want to preserve muscle and shed the excess fat.
Okay, so how do we make sure we're losing fat and not just water weight, or, even worse, muscle?
Resistance training is essential, like we discussed before. It helps you keep that muscle mass while you're in a calorie deficit. And remember, when it comes to creating that deficit, gradual is better than drastic. This goes back to what we were talking about with sustainability. Slow and steady wins the race.
It's all about those sustainable changes that support both our long-term health and a healthy body composition. This deep dive has been awesome. We've really dug into the science of fat loss, and I feel like I've learned so much already.
It's been great talking about this with you. And remember, this is just the start of your journey into fat loss. We've covered the physiological side of things, but now it's time to go even deeper.
That's right. There's a whole other layer to fat loss that we haven't even touched on yet.
Yeah, it really is a journey, and it's so interesting how all these pieces fit together. We've been talking about managing your environment, but you also need, the right tools to actually change your eating habits,
That's true. So how do we actually go about making those changes, especially when it comes to transitioning back to maintenance calories after a diet? I'd imagine just going back to your old ways of eating would make you gain all the way back, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's why having a plan for slowly increasing your calories is so important. You don't want to go from a strict deficit straight to eating anything you want.
So it's like a reverse diet, where you gradually increase your calories over time to find your new maintenance level.
You got it. And one key part of that reverse diet is sticking with those same healthy foods you were eating during your diet. It helps you avoid those crazy cravings and, helps you establish those long-term sustainable habits.
So hitting your goal weight doesn't mean you can just raid the dessert aisle.
Not exactly. It's more like gradually reintroducing the foods you might have limited while you were actively dieting.
Okay, that makes sense. What about those diet breaks we talked about? They sound helpful, but I could use a little more info on what they actually look like.
Think of a diet break like a planned vacation from your calorie deficit. You'd typically maintain your weight for a week or two during a longer dieting phase.
Wait, so taking a break can actually help you make progress? That seems kind of backwards.
I know, it might sound that way. But it's all about the big picture. Diet breaks can help you with, a lot of things. Like managing those feelings of, I can't eat anything. They help rebalance your hormones and can even give your metabolism a bit of a reset.
I can see how letting yourself take a break could make it easier to stick with your diet long term. It's like they say, sometimes you have to take one step back to take two steps forward.
That's a great way to put it. Dieting doesn't have to be so black and white. It's about finding an approach that works for you and incorporates those strategies that help you succeed, in the long run.
This is all making a lot more sense now. It really highlights how understanding the science can completely change how you view fat loss.
You're right. When you have that knowledge, you have the power to make good choices about your health.
Speaking of knowledge, before we wrap up this part, I wanted to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
The difference between weight loss and fat loss. They seem like the same thing, but you mentioned there's an important distinction between the two.
Yeah, you're right. People use them interchangeably all the time, but it's crucial to remember that weight loss just means any decrease in your total body weight. That could be muscle, water, fat loss, any of those. Fat loss is specifically about lowering the amount of fat stored in your body.
So it's possible to lose weight without losing any actual fat.
Exactly. It happens more than people realize. That's why it's so important to zero in on fat loss specifically. We want to keep the muscle and lose that extra fat.
Got it. So how can we be sure we're losing fat and not just water weight or, even worse, muscle?
Resistance training is key for this, like we discussed earlier. It really helps protect your muscle mass when you're in a calorie deficit. And remember, slow and steady wins the race, especially when it comes to creating that calorie deficit. Gradual is always better than drastic. It goes back to that idea of sustainability.
It really is all about making changes you can stick with that support both our long-term health and having a healthy body composition.
This deep dive has been incredible. We've really dug into the science of fat loss, and I feel like I've already learned so much.
It's been great chatting with you. And remember, this is just the beginning of exploring fat loss. We've covered the physiological side, but now it's time to get even deeper.
You're right. There's a whole other layer to this that we haven't even touched on. We've talked a lot about, like the physical stuff, the calories, the macros, the workouts. But what about the mental side of fat loss?
Right.
It seems like our mindset is huge when it comes to reaching our goals. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The psychology of fat loss is often overlooked, but it's so important for long-term success. Our mindset, our beliefs, even those ingrained habits can really impact our ability to get to a healthy weight and stay there.
So where do we even start with that? Like, how do we create a mindset that actually helps us reach our goals, especially when, we're constantly bombarded with messages about, like, quick fixes and crazy body standards?
One of the most powerful things you can do is just focus on self-compassion. Like, instead of beating yourself up for, slip-ups or anything you see as a failure, practice being kind to yourself, understanding.
It's like being your own best friend, not your worst critic,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. We often talk to ourselves in ways we'd never talk to someone we love, so why not give ourselves that same support?
It's easier said than done, though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
especially in a society that can be so judgmental about weight and appearance.
You're right. It definitely takes effort. You have to consciously challenge those negative thoughts and work towards a more positive, inner voice, and be mindful of the messages you're taking and like what social media accounts you follow, even what magazines you read. Choose to focus on the stuff that promotes, body positivity and accepting yourself.
So it's about shifting from wanting that external validation to feeling good about yourself from the inside.
Yeah, exactly. Real happiness comes from within, not from trying to fit into some mold that society's made up.
That's a great reminder. Now, how about motivation? Like, how do we stay motivated, especially when those cravings hit? Or when we just, don't feel like working out?
Oh, one thing that really helps is setting realistic goals that actually mean something to you. Instead of chasing a number on the scale, focus on how you want to feel. More energetic, more confident, just healthier overall.
I like that. It's like connecting with your why, those reasons why you want to change in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. When your goals match your values and what you really want out of life, it's much easier to stay motivated. It's not about punishing yourself or deprivation. It's about putting yourself and your well-being first.
So true. But what about those times when, motivation just dips? It happens to everyone, right? What are some practical ways to get back on track when you're feeling kind of discouraged?
Sometimes you just need a reminder of why you started, Go back to your goals, write them down, maybe even make a vision board that can help bring back that, initial spark.
I like that, like hitting the refresh button on your commitment.
And it can help to break those big goals down into smaller steps. That way it doesn't feel so overwhelming, and you can celebrate those small wins as you go.
Yeah, it's way easier to stay motivated when you feel like you're actually making progress.
That's it. And don't forget about the power of community. Surround yourself with supportive people, friends, family, maybe an online group or a coach, people who can cheer you on and, give you that little boost when you need it.
It's true. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone in this can make such a big difference.
Yeah.
It's like a reminder that we're all human and, we all go through tough times.
For sure. And remember, it's okay to ask for help if you're struggling. A therapist or a registered dietitian can give you that personalized guidance and support, help you work through those challenges and create a plan that really works for you.
That's a great reminder.
Yeah.
This whole conversation has been so insightful. We've explored the science, the strategies, and even the psychology of fat loss.
Yeah.
And I think, the biggest takeaway for me is that it's not just about a number on the scale. It's about self-discovery and creating a healthier and happier life.
I couldn't agree more. It's about finding a way of eating and living that really nourishes your body and mind.
It's about making those choices that support your well-being, celebrating your progress, and giving yourself a break along the way.
That's it. Fat loss is a journey, and what you learn along the way can change your life in such amazing ways.
Well said. There you have it, your deep dive into the science of fat loss with Dr. Mike Israetel. Hopefully you've picked up some valuable insights you can use on your own journey. Remember, it's not about quick fixes or magic solutions. It's about understanding how it all works, finding what works for you, and building those healthy habits that last a lifetime. If anything we talked about today resonated with you, or if you have questions, let us know. We always love hearing from you and keeping this conversation going.
And remember, you're capable of amazing things. Believe in yourself, keep learning, and keep working towards becoming the healthiest and happiest version of you.
Beautifully said. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep exploring.